Has there been a moment when you prayed, and the silence was so loud it felt like God had simply stopped listening? Like your words were bouncing off empty walls and nothing responded? You are not alone. Millions of believers experience this spiritual silence, wondering if God has moved on. Psalm 22 verse 1 says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Even David, a man after God's own heart, wrestled with moments of seeming abandonment. These feelings do not mean your faith is failing. They are part of a journey, a test of endurance, and an opportunity to deepen trust. In this video, we'll explore why God sometimes feels distant, what Scripture teaches about these moments, and how your faith can grow stronger even when answers seem delayed. You'll discover practical guidance, encouragement, and hope that your prayers are being heard, even in silence. Let's dive in. 1. Understanding the silence. God's silence can feel heavy, confusing, and painful. Many believers interpret quiet as absence, but often it is a period of spiritual growth, testing, and preparation. Silence allows God to cultivate patience, humility, and dependence on Him rather than our own understanding. Consider storms in nature. Strong winds test trees, breaking weak branches, while deep roots grow stronger. Similarly, periods of spiritual silence allow faith to strengthen and mature. During these times, it's natural to feel anxious or lonely, but God is always present, guiding us in ways that are often unseen. Prayer, meditation on Scripture, and reflection help believers recognize God's subtle work. Even in silence, small signs, coincidences, or inner peace may indicate His active presence. Remember that spiritual dryness is a season, not a permanent state. If this teaching strengthens your faith, subscribe right now to follow weekly Bible guidance that meets you in hard moments. 2. Why God seems far. At times, God's seeming distance is not abandonment but purposeful. He allows quiet seasons to shape character, deepen spiritual discernment, and strengthen endurance. Just as a sculptor chisels away stone to reveal beauty, God's silence refines patience, humility, and reliance on Him. These periods are opportunities for faith to grow beyond comfort and convenience. Feeling abandoned can actually lead to deeper intimacy with God. It encourages honest, heartfelt prayer, wrestling with doubt, and learning to listen with the soul rather than just the ears. Even Jesus experienced this sense of distance during the crucifixion, crying out in Psalm 22 verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me?" His example reminds us that feeling forsaken is not a failure of faith, but a natural part of the journey for those who walk closely with God. God's silence also opens space to notice blessings often overlooked in busy, answered prayer seasons. Behind the scenes, He is preparing paths, protecting us from unseen dangers, and nurturing spiritual maturity that only emerges through patience and waiting. By embracing these quiet seasons, believers can cultivate trust, resilience, and a closer relationship with God than would be possible in constant comfort and immediate answers. 3. Holding on to faith. Faith in silence requires active trust rather than passive waiting. Consistent engagement with God through prayer, Scripture, and reflection reinforces belief and strengthens spiritual endurance. Journaling prayers, revisiting answered prayers, and sharing with supportive faith communities are practical ways to maintain connection. Silence is also a chance to cultivate empathy. Experiencing periods of apparent abandonment enables believers to minister compassionately to others in spiritual struggle. Leaning into faith rather than relying solely on emotions builds spiritual resilience. Regular reflection helps believers discern subtle movements of God, whether through unexpected solutions, guidance from Scripture, or encouragement from others. His work continues even when unseen. If this guidance strengthens your faith, subscribe right now for weekly Bible teaching to help you navigate hard moments. 4. Yield to silence. High effort in prayer does not always produce immediate outcomes, and God's silence can feel heavy or confusing. Yet these quiet seasons are often a fertile ground for spiritual growth rather than a sign of neglect. Just as soil takes time to develop richness and strength, our hearts need periods of waiting to cultivate patience, endurance, and character. Have you noticed that personal transformation often happens during silent seasons? When faith persists without instant answers, spiritual roots grow deeper, preparing believers for future responsibilities, challenges, and blessings. These periods teach resilience, sharpen discernment, and develop a stronger, more mature trust in God. God's timing often differs from our own expectations. Learning to trust unseen processes ensures that when answers do come, they are fully recognized, appreciated, and applied in ways that strengthen faith. Silence also creates space for reflection, re-evaluation, and a more intimate awareness of God's presence and plan. By embracing quiet seasons, believers can grow spiritually, strengthen patience, and develop wisdom that only waiting can produce. These moments remind us that faith is not about immediate results, but about trusting God's perfect timing in every aspect of life. 5. Practical ways to navigate spiritual abandonment. When God feels distant, deliberate actions help maintain hope. Immersing yourself in Scripture provides examples of faithfulness and endurance, showing that even the most devoted individuals experience quiet seasons. Journaling prayers, reflecting on past answered prayers, and engaging with a community of believers strengthens confidence and perspective. Acts of service, worship, and intentional reflection anchor faith in practice. Observing small blessings and responding with gratitude reinforces trust in God's unseen work. Silence can be transformed into a period of spiritual productivity, fostering deeper connection and awareness. Practices like fasting, meditative prayer, or studying devotional material can deepen insight and patience. Silence becomes a space for spiritual growth and renewal rather than discouragement. If this practical guidance encourages your faith, subscribe right now to receive Bible insights for spiritual growth during difficult seasons. 6. Stories of endurance. Biblical figures like Joseph, Job, and David experienced long periods of silence from God, yet they remained faithful through their trials. Joseph spent years in prison despite being innocent, waiting patiently while God's plan unfolded in ways he could not yet see. Job endured unimaginable loss, yet he continued to trust God even when his world seemed to collapse around him. David often cried out in moments of despair, expressing raw emotion and doubt, yet he never abandoned his reliance on God. These examples illustrate that periods of silence do not mean abandonment. Often, unseen work is happening behind the scenes, preparing believers for greater blessings and shaping their character in ways that immediate answers never could. Waiting periods cultivate resilience, sharpen discernment, and deepen spiritual awareness, allowing believers to respond with faith rather than fear when answers finally arrive. Even when God seems absent, His plan is continuously unfolding. Recognizing the hidden work strengthens trust and provides reassurance that every season has a purpose. Challenges and trials contribute to spiritual growth, molding faith that is stronger, wiser, and more enduring. By reflecting on these biblical stories, believers can find courage and hope to navigate their own seasons of waiting, knowing that God's timing is always perfect. 7. The purpose behind God's silence. God's quiet periods often guide believers towards spiritual maturity, deeper insight, and reliance on Him. Silence teaches humility, discernment, and patience. It may redirect focus from short-term desires to long-term growth and eternal perspective. Challenges and unanswered prayers refine character and shape believers to better serve God and others. Unseen preparation during these times ensures that future blessings are meaningful and sustainable. Spiritual growth in silent seasons often results in wisdom, resilience, and a more intimate understanding of God's will. Even when invisible, God's activity continues. Believers who embrace silence learn to recognize subtle guidance, notice answered prayers in unexpected ways, and trust the ultimate plan, building faith that is enduring and resilient. If this insight encourages your spiritual journey, subscribe now to receive weekly guidance on navigating God's silent seasons. 8. Finding hope and assurance. Hope emerges by recognizing God's presence, even in silence. prayer, reflection, and scripture remind believers of His faithfulness and perfect timing. Small signs, coincidences, and inner conviction often indicate His work behind the scenes. Silence is an invitation to listen, grow, and strengthen faith. Moments of quiet can foster awareness, trust, and spiritual resilience that active periods alone cannot produce. Believers who persist through silent seasons develop confidence in God's plan, joy in His timing, and peace in His care. Faith grows not only in answered prayers, but in perseverance during uncertainty. These experiences deepen intimacy with God and create lasting spiritual strength, preparing believers for future challenges and blessings. 9. Connecting with God during silence. When God seems distant, believers can take intentional steps to maintain and strengthen their connection with Him. Focused prayer, worship, meditation, and expressions of gratitude help cultivate awareness of His presence even when answers are not immediate. Acts of service, reflection, and participating in a faith community provide practical reinforcement, reminding the heart that God is still at work in unseen ways. Even small daily rituals like reading scripture each morning or journaling prayers gradually deepen spiritual connection. Over time, subtle guidance, moments of clarity, and reassurance begin to emerge. What once felt like emptiness can become a fertile period of spiritual growth, building patience, discernment, and endurance. Silent seasons often teach lessons that active or noisy times cannot, allowing believers to refine their hearts, strengthen trust, and cultivate wisdom. Recognizing God's movement behind the scenes transforms anxiety into peace, doubt into understanding, and loneliness into profound spiritual awareness. Faith shifts from being reactive to active, anchored in trust rather than feelings. Each quiet moment becomes an opportunity to grow spiritually, reinforcing resilience and preparing believers for the challenges and blessings ahead. If this guidance strengthens your faith, subscribe now to receive weekly teachings that help you stay close to God even when He feels distant. Feeling abandoned is not evidence of God's absence. Psalm 22 verse 1 reminds us even the faithful struggle with silence, yet God's plan unfolds in perfect timing. By embracing patience, reflection, and intentional spiritual practices, believers emerge stronger, wiser, and more grounded. Even in silence, God works unseen, shaping character, refining faith, and preparing blessings. Trusting Him through these periods builds resilience, hope, and spiritual maturity that will last a lifetime. If this video encouraged you and strengthened your faith, like, share, and subscribe to receive more weekly guidance and Bible teaching for your spiritual journey.